season. Invited me at the best time. Well, I hope the rest of your quarter goes well, and I hope maybe something I say today or God says through me today gets through to you and keeps you going for the rest of the quarter. It's been exactly 4 months since I actually left SLO. I left SLO July 15th of this year, and I spent about 6 years of my life here, and that's about a quarter of my life. So it's basically all of my adult life here. And for those of you who don't know much about me, here's a little bit about me. I'm from Fresno County. I started here at Cal Poly. I was majoring in math, and I met God after a rough freshman year through my first job. And I was called to switch into food science after experiencing my first job. Shout out. And after my third year, I eventually switched, and that's why it took me so long to graduate. I served on worship teams at Journey Christian Fellowship, AACF, and at Shoreline Calvary Chapel, and that's us at Culture Fest, my 5th year. And I was on core in AACF as outreach leader from 2017 to 2018. And there's our core team from that year. There's Robbie, and you might not recognize some of the other people. And then the prayer table, that's when we started it that year. There's DC and Andre, the original members, and Peter joined us, and I don't know who does it today, maybe more people. But today I'm currently in pastry. I work for this company called Bon Appetit, and they contract at Google. No, it's a different Bon Appetit. It's a food management company, and they contract at Google. I know what you're talking about, though, the magazine, right? And the YouTube channel with the famous people. No, that's not the same. I thought it was too. I was kind of excited. Like, maybe I get to meet those people. But no, it didn't. Not being the same. But it's still pretty cool. I mean, I get free food, I get to use the gym, I get free juice, and all those other things. I was interning there, and I got a full-time position. I also work part-time as the worship director at a church called Lincoln Glen Church in West San Jose. Now, each of these aspects that I shared about my life, they all have long stories with a lot of different emotions, a lot of scary emotions, a lot of sad emotions, a lot of crazy emotions. But our Heavenly Father was above them all. But before I share anything else, I want to just pray before we get into God's Word. The book of Genesis. The book of Genesis is the first book in the Bible, and it talks about Adam and Eve and creation and the fall of man, which is sin. And you start to see these, as in children's ministry, we kind of see them as heroes. Abraham, Noah, you get all these colorful stories. But if you actually read Genesis, they're not very heroic. There's a lot of simple things that happen, a lot of sinful families, a lot of curses, a lot of just sadness when you read it. The first time I read it, I was heartbroken. I was like, children's ministry never told me this. But specifically today, we're going to focus on the story of Joseph in Genesis and kind of the broad overarching story of Joseph. That's why the message is Joseph Squared. Whoa. And I wanted to focus on that story because that story starts off much the same with a sinful family and hatred and certain things. But one of the things that's different about the story is God's showcase of Joseph and how his undivided attention brings God's people from basically outside of Egypt into Egypt, which is important because of a famine that happens. And God uses Joseph because of his undivided attention, even though sin was being thrown at him left and right. So Joseph wasn't a sinless person, and I want to make that clear, but in the context of the story, because of Joseph's undivided attention, God uses him, and a lot of things go wrong, and Joseph's attention on God is what kept him through. So before we begin going into the Word, I just wanted to kind of catch us up and give us context. Joseph is one of 12 brothers, and his father loves him more than the other brothers for a specific reason, because he's one of the firstborn sons of the wife that he loves the most, which is, he has multiple wives, that's another story. And that's also like a sinful thing, but if you read that and look into it, you'll understand why. But Joseph is gifted this coat of many colors by his father, and he wears it out of honor, and his brothers kind of hate that. Like, why does our dad love him more? And we don't like that he's showing favoritism towards him. And we pick up when Joseph has his first dream. So let's read Genesis 37, verse 5. Now Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said to them, "Hear this dream that I have dreamed. Behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and behold, my sheaf arose and stood upright. And behold, your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf. His brother said to him, "Are you indeed to reign over us, or are you indeed to rule over us?" So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. Now, as I said before, it says they hated him even more because they were already seeing that their father showed favoritism towards him and he wore that coat. Now, why did he choose to wear the coat, and why did he choose to share the dream? The Bible doesn't say that he did it out of pride. The Bible doesn't say that he did it out of hatred towards his brothers and not showing off. But why else would we wear a coat that someone gives us? Like a gift, right? And if someone gives you something, even still today, today's day and age, we would wear something that someone gives to us out of respect. Like someone, especially if they're close to you, someone loves you and you love them back, you want to wear it back, right? It's getting kind of cold.
Oh gosh. Oh my Lord.
Some of you don't know, this is a gift to me. As a grad gift, and some of you pitched in to buy it. So thank you. And yeah, see now all of you feel loved that I wanted to gift.
What have we done?
Joseph didn't do it out of pride, Joseph did it out of respect and to show that love back. Another thing is he shares the dream, and the people that he works with out in the field, and I wanted to point out too that sheaves are actually like bundles of straw or like hay, so it's like seeing bundles of hay rise up into the sky. And a dream that was so realistic like that, I'm pretty sure you'd probably tell your closest people. And his closest people were his brothers who he worked with, and his dad who he lived with too, and he loved. So he wanted to share that with them and kind of asked them. And you do see that he doesn't tell them like, oh, this means you're gonna bow down to me, this means you're gonna do this, do that. It's his brothers who make that assumption. It's his brothers who develop that hate. And it's his father who showed that favoritism towards him that caused that hate to even happen in the first place. So Joseph's just obeying God and showing respect and showing love. So this causes his brothers to plot to kill him, which is kind of a little bit extreme. But one of the brothers says, that's a little bit too much. Let's not kill him, let's just sell him into slavery. Which some of you might think that's worse. Some of you might think that might be better, because hey, he gets to live. But Joseph continues to roll on with God's plan, and he ends up in Egypt. His master is an officer of Pharaoh. So let's pick up in Genesis 39, verse 2. The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man. And he was in the house of his Egyptian master. His master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord caused all that he did to succeed in his hands. So Joseph found favor in his sight and attended him. And he made him overseer of his house and put him in charge of all that he had. And the Bible makes it clear that the Lord's favor was with him right away. And that the officer was even aware of that, to the point where the Bible says that the officer had no care for anything but the food that he ate. He trusted Joseph so much because he knew that the Lord was with him. Now, once again, the sinful world turns into Joseph's life, and Joseph has to kind of roll with the punches. Genesis 39, verse 7. And after a time, his master's wife cast her eyes on Joseph and said, "Lie with me." But he refused and said to his master's wife, "Behold, because of me, my master has shown no concern about anything in the house, and he has put everything that he has in my charge. He is not greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept back anything from me except you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" And as she spoke to Joseph day after day, he would not listen to her, to lie beside her, or to be with her. But one day when he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house was there in the house, she caught him by his garment, saying, "Lie with me." But he left his garment in her hand and fled and got out of the house. So Joseph knew not to sin, and he literally fled from sin. He continued to avoid sin. He continued to just, you know what? She's asking me to sin. I'm just going to stay away from her and completely just flee. And another thing is, when she asked him to sin, you don't see him saying, making up excuses like, I don't think that would affect my relationship with my master very well. I don't think that, I'm going to raise this a little bit. I think that would harm my relationship with my master. Maybe he'll send me to jail, or maybe this will cause something weird between us, and the whole community will look down upon us, and we'll start some relationship. He doesn't think of any of those things. The only thing he thinks about is God. He thinks about, I'm not going to sin against God. Why would I sin against God? So he's completely goes straight to God when he tells her the honest truth. Like, I'm not going to sin against God. I'm not going to do this with you. But the sinful world, once again, takes Joseph on his journey, and the woman basically frames him, and he's sent to jail. And let's pick up in Genesis 39, verse 20. And Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. He was there in prison. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. The keeper of the prison paid no attention to anything that was in Joseph's charge, because the Lord was with him. And whatever he did, the Lord made it succeed. Now you start to see a pattern here, just as he was when he went to his master's house. The Lord is immediately with him right where the next step is taken. And when he's in this prison and he's in this place of position, 2 of Pharaoh's officers are sent to prison for a crime that they both committed, and it doesn't really detail what happened. But they both start having these dreams, and Joseph interprets them for them, and both of those dreams come true, and one of them ends up back in their position, back for Pharaoh, working for Pharaoh. And in God's timing, time passes. The officer probably didn't think much of it, like this dream came true, and I'm back in my position. But it gets raised up in that officer's mind when Pharaoh has a dream, and he tries to find someone to interpret it. He looks across the land, the Bible says, and he couldn't find anyone. Like, oh, is someone doing something about this? And that officer, it comes to a man like this, in whom is the Spirit of God. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has shown you all this, there is none so discerning and wise as you are. You shall be over my house, and all my people shall order themselves as you command. Only as regards the throne will I be greater than you." And once again, the pattern continues. He gets moved on to the next step in his journey, and God lifts him to a high position in that journey. And I wanted to point out this next verse because it's important to the illustration that we're going to paint later. In Genesis 40, verse 51, it talks about his firstborn and his secondborn children, and what he names them. Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh, for, he said, "God has made me forget all my hardship and all my father's house." The name of the second he called Ephraim, "For God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction." Now, as we see later in the story, Joseph didn't actually forget his brothers and his family and his father's house. He divided attention on God and his broader plan, made him kind of forget about those negative things that happened, and he just continued to focus on what God's broader picture was. If one were to look at all these different things that happened, being sold into slavery, being framed, and placed into prison, you'd probably think, man, I'm not going to forget all the hatred, all the lies, all the hurt. But only with God was Joseph able to acknowledge God, the perfect plan. Now Joseph's brothers come to Egypt during the famine, and there's a point at which Joseph's decision to hide and test his brothers is called into question. Some may say he wanted to do so out of revenge or spite, but the Bible says in Genesis 42, verse 9, that Joseph remembers the dreams that he dreamed of them as soon as he sees them. And he remembered the dreams because, as we see in this story, Joseph, God, and dreams seem to be pretty in tune. So when he remembers dreams, he doesn't remember, oh, by seeing his brothers, I remember what you did to me. I remember the hate that you had for me. I remember you selling me into slavery. I remember causing me to go to jail. He doesn't remember that. He remembers, oh, I had dreams of you. Maybe there's a connection with God. God has had me to interpret dreams. Maybe there's something behind that dream. So by doing that and remembering the dreams, it's Joseph turning to God. Now the following actions he does when he sees his brothers can be questioned as revenge or spite. And I've done some research on it. There's some biblical scholars that basically that part of the story can be a reflection of Jesus and Israel and Jesus' second coming. But that's another conversation and another story. There are many explanations, and it just take too long to get into. But the main point is that once the repentant hearts of the brothers are shown, then Joseph eventually reveals himself to them. And he points everything back to God's plan. So Genesis 45, verse 4. So Joseph said to his brothers, "Come near to me, please." And they came near. And he said, "I am your brother, Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there are yet 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. And God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth, and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh, and lord of all his house, and ruler over all the land of Egypt. Even after his family, God's people, are brought to Egypt and Jacob, their father dies. And this kind of causes a scare in Joseph's brothers. So they're kind of worried, oh, our father died. Maybe our father was the thing keeping him from enacting revenge on us. But Joseph again reminds them of God's broader purpose in Genesis 50, verse 20. As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. To better illustrate the story and how it connects to my story, I wanted to invite a volunteer. Does anyone want to volunteer to help me illustrate? I think I have one over there. Thank you, Jacob. Okay, if you could maybe stand in front, right here. Now I'm going to hand you some things, or I'm going to place some things on the table right there, and you let me know which things you want to taste. You won't actually taste them, but let's say like I had a spoon and you can taste them, right? No, usually taste what's on the spoon. I have some mochi flour. You got a spoon? Would you want to taste it? You would? Okay, let's see. There's cocoa powder. Got some butter. That's empty, right? We got some egg. Let's pretend that there's. And then we've got some sugar. So which one of these would you probably want to taste? Probably the sugar by itself. Yeah, I see you want to probably taste the sugar by itself, maybe. But if you were to put all these things together and mix it up, put it in the oven, apply some heat, maybe some pressure, and let it cool off, what do you think would come out of it?
Yeah. I was gonna say cake.
Oh, it could be a cake. Well, I made cupcakes that are chocolate cupcakes, and I made the mochi ones. Let's see which one's on top. Oh, you got the chocolate. This is a cupcake. And you get a cupcake, and you get a cupcake. There's mochi and there's chocolate. So this represents
Joseph Winfrey.
This can represent something in God's plan. Those can all represent different steps. There's maybe things that you may not like when you see them at first. Flour, what am I supposed to do with flour? It's kind of weird. What am I supposed to do with this slimy egg? It's going to taste gross. Sugar tastes pretty good. I could go roll with this. But if you wait and you're patient and you let God mix things together and see the plan fold together, you wait for things to bake, because you might see something that looks like something that God's placing in your life, but then God says, no, I gotta put it in the oven, I've gotta bake it. And sometimes it's really painful. You gotta be patient, you gotta let it bake, and sometimes it hurts.
For science,
showing you a sin, and let that go. And
Wow.
He's like, okay, you can take it. I'm not gonna feed it to you. That's a great example of how God works in our lives.
Great example.
And we start to look at things and we start to see the final product, but we've got to be patient. In Joseph's case, he saw some recipes through, God gave him those dreams and he got to see some recipes, but in other cases he didn't know. Like when he was sold into slavery, he didn't know, but he just focused on God's overall plan and he trusted that the final product would be great. And his undivided attention on that final product is kind of like eating a pastry. When you eat a pastry, you don't think, oh, I'm taking a bite into some slimy eggs and to some sandy sugar and to some flour that's some ground up wheat. You don't think that. You might think, if you're a food scientist, you might think, hey, like these eggs are in this and they're emulsifiers and the sugar adds a little taste, the salt adds another dimension in there. But normally we're not going to think about each thing individually. So Joseph recognized each step in the plan and the functional properties of them. Like he's saying, yeah, God brought me and he used you. That was the function, that was the purpose. I'm not going to dwell on these things on their own, just like if you had a worldly perspective of things. So looking back on my life, there's plenty of pastries that have been revealed to me in such a way. Here at Cal Poly, I began as a math major, chasing the American dream and worldly success, and those motivations were not enough. And I had a pretty heartbreaking first year, and through that failure, God put me to my first job at Boba Stop. And at Boba Stop, there were people that worked there from Journey Christian Fellowship. There were people that worked there from Shoreline Calvary Chapel. And I started to open up because I was pretty shy. And they put me on the register, and they said, this is where you're going to be. So I started talking to people, and I started making connections with some people that were regulars and learning their names. And I started to learn what a church family was like too, and what a church business was like. And that's what led me to pray about, hey, I'm going to switch into food science, because I think this food industry is something that God has given me the love for and the patience for. And I also started to serve at Journey Christian Fellowship, and I started to learn what being on a worship team really means. And I was heartbroken by my first Christian crush, but continued to move forward. And I served in any way, whatever way that I could. And unfortunately, as some of you might get ignited by the Lord, and you feel like, what ways can I help? What can I do? Can I do slides? Can I do music? Can I speak? Can I do all these things? But then you start to realize, I also have school. I also want to maybe run or play basketball, and then you burnt out. And I got burnt out. And this called me to retreat for a while. God said, no, you gotta take a break. And you gotta find a discipler. You gotta find someone that can keep you accountable and to teach you to take things slower. So that's what led me to Shoreline Calvary Chapel and to be discipled by worship pastor Chris Benoli. And around that time too, I was working with someone from AACF actually, and he asked me to move in with him and move in with some AACF people. And I decided to go and move into that house. And as I was experiencing burnout, a couple of the members I lived with were in charge of the men's ministry, and I decided, hey, I should go to men's group. And I still remember that first men's group. I was so vulnerable and burnt out, and I needed community, I needed family. I remember that first group. I'm pretty sure Adam's was in that group. I'll never forget. And I remember opening up and sharing something that I never thought I would share right away. And I still felt a little bit, because I'm not really Asian. I was a little nervous. Everyone seems so connected and so joyful, and like they know each other like family, but I'm not Asian. But then I noticed Journey's like mostly Asian, so I'm just staying focused on God. I could see a brotherhood forming here. So I went to that winter retreat, and the rest is history. Now, This is a picture of me and Tobin, and I have a really personal connection to this story. There's a reason why it's my profile picture. It's a little bit bigger and deeper. Now in the background, you can see, I'm not going to mention their names, but there's a couple in the background, and I'm not going to say where they are. And
I'm going to point out these people, but I'm not going to point out.
The girl of that couple was someone that, my first Christian crush that kind of broke my heart. But if things had worked out the way that I planned, I would have never met Tobin. I would have never been in AACF. And there were some times when I felt like, maybe I should have went to AA earlier, man. Like, God, why didn't you take me here earlier? Maybe I knew people in AA since my freshman year. Maybe I should have went my freshman year. Did I do something wrong? But then I realized, no, because if I had, my first Christian crush wouldn't have met her husband, and now they have a kid. And God used me for that, and I was an ingredient in that recipe. So God's plan was perfect, and I surrendered that to Him. And there's also the time when, last year, it was a pretty rough year for me, because everyone that I served with in AACF on core, they all left and graduated, and I was starting to feel like, why am I still here? It was really rough. And, I felt like it was time for me to go. I didn't have a mission or a goal in sight, and I felt like, yeah, I'm no longer on core, I'm no longer serving on outreach. What's for me? And it took a while, and me and Brian met with Pastor Chris. We talked to our discipler about my depression, and I kept taking it day by day, and eventually This is a picture of me and Jacob at Bad last year. Right away, almost immediately, like first or second month in, I met Jacob and we connected, and I almost immediately became his discipler. And then I met other people that are freshmen too, like Jonathan Yams and Phoebe, and we started talking. I started passing things on, and I started to help people that are still here, that wanted help, that were willing to learn. wanted to ask questions, and that wouldn't have happened if I didn't spend this extra year here and I didn't trust God's plan. So this is God's purpose, and even maybe my current experiences could lead me to something even bigger in my life. Now, there's also times in our lives when we may be ingredients in someone else's story, and I don't want to discount that fact, and I also call you to pray about that too. There was a time here at Cal Poly when I was switching majors, and I don't know if anyone here has switched majors. Has anyone been a part of that process? Oh, Charlie's been a part of that process. It's a pretty difficult process. There's a contract you have to sign, and you only get one shot. If you don't meet everything on the contract, then you fail and you can't try again. You don't get a second chance. And one of those things on that contract was I had to get a B in Chem 127, B or higher. And some of you know what Chem 127 is, but for those of you who don't, Chem 127, from what I heard going into it, a lot of my friends actually failed it multiple times, like 3 or 4 times you had to take it. And I was really nervous. Even though I took AP Chem in high school, I didn't pass the AP Chem test, and I was really scared. I don't want to blow my one shot switching in. So I got a tutor. And what ends up happening is me and my tutor get along well, but the class, I benefited from a really good professor, and her teaching style, my learning style just clicked immediately. Her notes were really detailed and they matched with her tests, and I was starting to do really well to the point where I felt like, I don't think I need the tutor anymore. But this was around the same time that I started to pray about the people in my life that God has placed, and I started to pray about, is there a way I could share the gospel with this person? And so before I decided to tell the tutor, I don't think I need you anymore, I prayed about it and I said, you know what, I think I'm gonna wait for a moment to where I could either invite her to church or somehow share the gospel. So I started praying for God to open an opportunity. And there was one day in particular, it was a 3-day weekend, and I was really tired, because sometimes when we have 3-day weekends, we stay up a little later on Sunday nights and we sleep in, and I felt like so sleep deprived and exhausted. I was supposed to meet with the tutor on a Monday, that was a holiday, and I lived on California in Foothill, so I had to bike up here to Baker, and we met on the 3rd floor. And for some reason, I think the elevators weren't working, so I had to I had to take the stairs. So I was thinking in my head, like, I'm not gonna go. And I had like a message prepared to send to her. I don't think I'm gonna go today. I don't think I need you as a tutor anymore. But I remembered, no, I have to somehow share the gospel. And I remember praying again too, like, God, please. I just want to somehow share God's love, somehow mention God, somehow mention Christ. Give me that opportunity. So I biked all the way up. I was really tired, exhausted, out of breath, probably really late. And I opened up my iPad because we looked at our chemistry notes on my iPad. And I had forgotten because I was sleep deprived. A sermon was open. And she asked me, oh, what sermon are you listening to? And I told her who it was and what church it was from, and I told her what church I go to, and I asked her if she went to church or if she was a part of anything, and she said, yeah, I used to go to Crew, was checking out Grace, but I haven't really been going to church. Maybe I should probably do that more, get back into that. And so I invited her to a small group, and she told me no, but she was open to it, and thanks for letting me know, maybe in the future. So I had it in. So now I decided, okay. Every time I meet with this tutor, I'm going to invite her to small group. So the quarter moves on. It's about halfway through the quarter, and every week I was inviting her to the small group. Like, hey, it's on Friday. We have dinner. We have worship. And eventually, I got to the point where I said, okay, I think this time I'm not going to ask her because she already knows, and I invite her every time. So I'm just going to let her, ask me, and that's exactly what happened. That first time I decided not to ask her, at the end of our meeting, she said, hey, do you have that small group? And then I told her, yeah, we have the small group. We have dinner. It's going to be at my place. It's going to be at this time. Do you need a ride? And she said, yeah, sure. Look, gave her all the info. And she got plugged into that small group right away. And she started going to Journey, and she started serving at Journey. And she met her future husband in that small group. And that wouldn't have happened if I didn't pray about, am I an ingredient in this person's story? Am I something that's going to lead to something greater? And I want to challenge you to pray about that with the people in your lives. Maybe there's someone in your life that God has placed you as a part of their walk for a reason. Now, there are other stories and other recipes that maybe we don't really get to see it come to fruition. Maybe there's parts where you're going to be a part of this plan, but you're not going to see it in your time. It might be years later. And there also might be recipes where you think that you know what's coming, like, oh, this is going to be a chocolate chip cookie. This is going to be something that God's done before, but then God throws in, I don't know, pretzels or toffee or something like crazy to throw you off. Like, oh, then I don't really understand God. I think God's doing something different this time. So just pray and trust in the greatest pastry chef of all time. He'll make all things work together for your good.
Amen.
So my challenge to you would be to be as Jesus and seek the Father. Find ways, just as Joseph did, to give undivided attention to God's steps in the greater plan. Pray for understanding for God's movement in every circumstance of your life. Don't discount any little thing, any little person that you see. Maybe there's someone you walk past on campus every day that you've never talked to, that you always say hi, or you always notice each other and you give each other a smile. Just pray about, is there something that God is calling me to do here? And I want to also challenge you to keep a journal. If it's too much for you right now, to do it daily, maybe do it weekly. Find ways to keep it creative and to keep you going. Maybe do video vlogs that's personal to you and just keep it to yourself. Maybe do audio vlogs, podcasts that only you can look back at. So find ways to make it something that you look forward to and reflecting at, so that you can pray about those things and start to notice, oh, like I did in my story, I start to look back and realize, oh, there is something happening there. There is something leading up to something. So I really challenge you to do that, and I pray that each of you would help each other in that. So that's the message for today, but I wanted to end with, if this is your first time hearing of Jesus Christ, I want to invite you to pray with me. The Bible says in the book of Romans that all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, but by surrendering our lives to Jesus, confessing and turning away from our sinful desires, we receive the free gift of salvation. So if you'd like to take this first step with God or declare Jesus the risen Lord of your life, or maybe you already know this to be true, but you want to reiterate that, I invite you to pray with me. So with all